Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Mindful Parenting webinar that we are running a series where we're inviting students from anywhere to share their mindfulness journey as to how it has helped them to transform themselves as well as their relationships. And there's so much to learn from our young people today because their world is very different from the world that we grew up in. And by understanding them better, we will certainly be able to support them and to also motivate and encourage them in a better way. So it's wonderful that many of you parents out there are joining this webinar in order to get more insights and improve or sharpen and enhance our parenting skills so that our children will have a happier time growing up. So I'm delighted to have my colleagues with me as well. Frank Singham, who's a senior counselor at Brahm Center. He often counsels parents as well as students. And Mei Cheng, who is the manager of our assist line. She is the one who manages the call center that receives calls from both parents and students who are in distress. And those of you who don't know the numbers, do take it down because you are always welcome to call May and also her colleague that they both man the center is 6655-0000. 6655-0000. Or if you prefer to WhatsApp, it's 9766-0000. 9766-0000. I'll also put it on the chat so that you can actually copy it down. And today we have a very special guest. He was a student of mine previous semester. And when he first joined the course, he looked pretty nervous at the beginning of the course. And I did see a transformation that took place during the 13 weeks that we spent seeing each other once a week during the module as it progressed during the semester. So I'm very pleased and very proud of him as well for agreeing to come on this show because it's not easy for one to want to talk about their own vulnerabilities and weaknesses and also to share their journey. So I'd like to welcome Brahman. Where are you, Brahman? Are you there? Okay, Brahman, so I'm now going to hand over the stage to you and you can actually do the share screen. And if you have any slides, please feel free to use them.
I don't have slides for today.
Okay.
Oh.
So Brahman is a third-year chemistry student, and I'm very pleased that he is willing to join us and to share his journey with all of you. All right, Brahman, over to you, and we're all going to go into non-video mode to give you the stage.
Thanks, Prof, for having me today. Today, I'd like to share with everyone my journey with mindfulness and specifically how it has helped improve the relations with myself and my family. For some context, my family is actually moved here from the Philippines. So my mom stays in Singapore while my dad works overseas. And I moved here when I was 5. So growing up, I've had a very strange relationship with my parents because they're not really close. Because my dad only comes to Singapore once every 2 or 3 months because of the business, and my mom stays at home to take care of the family. Growing up, I suffered from chronic eczema, and it has affected me quite a lot growing up, and how my parents dealt with it has really affected me. So from an early age, my family has a lot of politics. My older brother, he fell out with my parents and he's not really in communication with the family anymore. So because of that, different members of my family they took sides, and then because I was very young, they tried to pull me in. So that happened with my mom. She would tell me bad things about my brother, and then my dad would tell me a different set of things. And I guess that really affected how I saw my family um, as a unit. And when I saw my friends growing up with like more normal families, I used to get really jealous and quite resentful of my own parents and my siblings because of uh, how much arguing, how much bickering went on in our day-to-day lives. And it was something that I never realized that uh, I could change. And it was something that I had given up on until I learned how to react to the situation mindfully. Um, Growing up, my mom has always like instilled in me the importance of having like the importance of showing face to people. So with my chronic eczema, last time when I used to visit family friends, my mom would tell me to cover up, and it really hurt my feelings because my skin, my damaged skin wasn't really my fault, and also like I felt like she was my mom, so she should be the most understanding about it. And um, on some reflection, I realized that maybe it was because she didn't want people to comment and um, let those comments hurt me. But I feel like it really damaged my self-esteem, and and it really led to some like issues that I faced many years later. Like for instance, because of my skin getting red, flaky, and sometimes like it gets very oozy. Um, it's not really good for me to wear like long sleeve shirts or like pants all the time. So to let the wounds breathe. But for I think a good 2 or 3 years, I would actually just wear jackets everywhere when I'm out, even when it's hot, really, really hot, and I refuse to look at myself in the mirror. Um, I tried talking to my mom about it, but she wasn't really very open to listening. And I feel like there's a very big lack of understanding between um, my mom and myself in a lot of cases. Um, so after taking the mindfulness course in NUS, I started to identify the feelings that I would get when I talk to my parents or my siblings. Um, it really helped me acknowledge the feelings that I got and actually dig into the reasons for getting those feelings in the first place. And I realized that a lot of the time, uh, a lot of the time when I get angry or annoyed at my family for like being fake or like trying to trying to use each other for their own like motives or anything like that. When I used to get angry, like I really didn't understand why, and it really affected me for a long time. But with mindfulness, I learned to um, firstly identify the feeling and then slowly work on why I felt that way. Uh, I feel like taking a few deep breaths whenever you get overwhelmed with emotion is extremely helpful as it turns off the part of your brain that feels like you're getting attacked, and it lets you rationalize whatever you're feeling. Meaning, I learned how to understand where my siblings are coming from and where my parents are coming from because how I grew up is very different from my siblings. So they have a very different relationship with my parents. So I used to get very angry at them for like being rude to my parents or like getting easily angry at my parents. But I realized that I can't really judge them as like everyone has a different experience. Um, when as for my dad, I'm not that close to my dad. And because of that, I don't really interact with him that much. But my growing up, sometimes we would get into a few arguments um, because of things like very trivial stuff. And when I talked to him, it was actually because he wanted the best for me, but I didn't really understand that as well. Um, mindfulness really helped me with my relationship with my dad more so than my mom, because my dad is a very logical person, and a lot of the things he does is mainly for the family. And once I calmed down and use mindfulness to um, identify my emotions, I actually realized that whatever he says, or like sometimes when I feel that he's being too harsh, it's actually to like in the interest of the family and in my own interest. But sometimes I do feel like there are much better ways to to fix like a problematic behavior in me and my siblings. Um, it's much better to talk to us rather than shout and like immediately punish us, I feel, because um, after a certain age, it doesn't. I feel like the whole shouting and hitting thing doesn't really work anymore, and it I feel like it might lead to some resentment in the family, which is what happened. Yeah. Um, Also, mindfulness for me, it really helped with my skin condition, because every time that I get stressed out, I would instinctively want to scratch. But dropping back into my breath and actually ironically focusing on the itch actually helps me prevent the scratching from happening and stabilizes my skin. And all these all these improvements in my relationship with my parents and my skin, it's not really perfect yet, but I feel like um, there will be improvements as long as I keep working at it and my parents are more open to talking to me about my problems and their problems. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Bremen, for that very heartfelt sharing and your courage to be so open, as these are many of your vulnerabilities and the difficulties that you had undergone as a child growing up. I recall you coming into class wearing long sleeve, long pants, and trying to cover as much of the eczema that you had. The parts that you couldn't cover were actually on your face.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I recalled you mentioning that one of the things that troubled you as well is what people thought of you,
Mm.
especially in seeing the scabs or the wounds that was actually very obvious. So,
Yeah.
would you like to share how you overcame that? You know, that whole conscious feel of what people thought of you.
I think what really helped with the whole feeling self-conscious about my skin was firstly improving it, because I feel like mindfulness really had a very big role to play in the improvement of my skin. Um, it helps calm. I'm not sure if everyone will experience this, but when I first started taking mindfulness more seriously, my skin felt less inflamed, and my sleep quality was much better, which I feel helped my skin recover more as I slept. Because in the past I would like be up all night scratching, I wouldn't be able to sleep. So I feel like mindfulness had helped my skin physically recover, and that also helped me feel less self-conscious of my skin. Um, but psychologically, mindfulness really helped me realize that no one's really judging you, and like everyone's actually very preoccupied in their heads. Yeah. And like no one's actually judging you. And mindfulness helped me learn to accept myself and to not fuss over the things that I can't really change. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, you mentioned about your father being harsh, and
Yeah.
maybe there are fathers out there as well who are listening, and even mothers, right? I mean, it's not just
Yeah.
exclusively fathers who can be harsh with their kids.
Mhm.
What would you say to fathers and mothers out there who tend to be harsh with their children, tend to be punishing in nature when their kids don't do as they're told? Could you share one or two incidents that you could help shed some light as to how it pained you or even psychologically caused some yeah, some scarring?
Um, my dad has actually not been that harsh, like physically harsh on the family ever since I was born. But my brothers and sisters, they experienced it firsthand. When my dad got angry, he would like hit them, throw things around, sometimes throw furniture at my siblings. And um, from what I know, my siblings, they get very afraid to share things with my dad. Even for myself, I didn't experience that, but just the fact that my dad like shouts at me, he doesn't try to he doesn't try to understand my point of view, and it just makes it hard for me to share my feelings with him, and it makes it hard to have a conversation with him. And because of that, it leads to a lot of misunderstanding between me and him. Um furthermore, furthermore, when I was growing up, he would often like he I hmm, sorry my dad wouldn't actually understand, like try to understand why me or my siblings did the things that we did. He just automatically took very extreme measures like grounding us for the smallest things. And it honestly just, it didn't really stop us from doing those things. It just made us better at hiding what we did from him, because like it's not a safe space to share. Yeah. So like meaning like there was one time um my sibling, I think she fractured her leg when she like I think 10 years ago. And she didn't really bother to tell my parents. She went to my auntie and uncle instead, and to get like all the treatment and everything. And when she came back home, like of course my uncle and auntie, they called my parents. And when she got back home, my parents were really angry at her for like not telling them in the first place. But I think it's because my sister was scared of like getting a punishment even when like she was already injured like that. Yeah. So I think having like being too harsh on your children makes it harder for you to connect with them because they won't want to share anything with you. Yeah.
Thank you, Brahman, for sharing that, because I think it's important for parents to realize that when our children don't want to tell us things, is because telling the truth could get them in trouble.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
even though we think they're not doing things, actually they learn how to do it without us knowing.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you, when you become a parent, now that you've gone through what you have gone through in life, how would you treat your kids?
Um, I think I would want them to know that no matter what they do, even if it's wrong, I mean, of course that I would like talk to them about why it's wrong, but I wouldn't go straight to punishment. I want to create a safe space for them to share whatever they're going through and to know that no matter what they do, I'm there for them. Yeah. And I think if I do that consistently, my relationship with my future kids, if I do have kids, um, will be really good because they'll treat me more like friends, but yeah, like they'll share more with me. And I think that will really help with our relationship.
Thank you. Another question I have is you mentioned that after doing the mindfulness course, or as you were doing the mindfulness course, your relationship with your parents did improve. What foundational attitudes did you find that really helped you to do that shift? Because it wasn't your parents who were changing, it was you.
I think, hmm, I think it was kindness. Kindness is really important for me because I learned how to treat them with kindness and understanding. Um, because I used to I think it's very instinctive for people to fight back when you're getting shouted at or like when you feel like someone's doing you injustice. So in the past, I would like argue back and everything, but with mindfulness, like I learned to calm myself down a bit before and learn to like think about what I'm about to say before speaking it. So that really helped de-escalate the situation. And over time, I realized that the de-escalation of the situation actually helped me be able to talk to my parents more easily. Yeah, because if even though they might be angry and they might be like shouting at me or whatever, um, me not shouting back makes both parties less angry. So and more open to, I think, constructive conversation. Yeah.
Did you feel like you became the adult?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes, yeah, but I still have a lot to learn. Yeah.
So by changing your response to them, did you see any change in them in responding to you?
Um, hmm. I
When you
would
didn't
say
shout back, right?
maybe,
Yeah.
sorry.
For example, when you didn't shout back and something that you could have been doing in the past in reaction.
I feel like it wasn't a very immediate change. It was just like now I feel like sometimes it's like instead of the go-to um, reaction to whatever I tell them, which is like shouting or getting mad, they would actually like calm down, like not really calm down, more like they aren't so angry and they're, they're not so quick to shouting at me anymore. And I feel like um, it's nice because we get to actually have like a more adult conversation instead of like them threatening to take things away from me or whatever. Yeah.
Thank you. So there are a couple of questions here posed by the people who are attending this webinar. Um, does the feeling of my family is different and not normal? And the envy that you had for your friend's family, is that still something you feel right now?
Um, honestly, I would say yes. I still feel that way, and it's a feeling that I don't think will ever go away because um, every time my family gets together, my family is quite big, so there's five siblings and two parents. Yeah, so there's always a lot of passive aggressiveness and like my older brother, he still doesn't talk to my parents. So whenever I do see that firsthand, it generally makes me um, a bit sad and envious of my friends. But at the same time, um, I feel like I'm better able to cope with those feelings now, as opposed to last time where it'll affect me for a few days. Like I'll be like sad and depressed for a few days, because I used to go to my friend's house quite often to kind of escape my home environment, I guess. So seeing my friend's family take me in so easily and to treat me as like their family, and then seeing how they interact with their children, it's very like it was nice, but at the same time it's really sad because I know I will never get that. But mindfulness did help me accept that there's some things that it's not up to me to change. And yeah, so it doesn't really bother me that much anymore. Yeah.
Thank you, Brahman. So now I'd like to invite Frank to join us. If you could turn on your video, please, Frank. And I'd like to invite you to share with the parents out there how often you have seen parents' conflicts or even their harsh treatment on their children have resulted in their children growing up to be difficult or having very poor relationships with them. And what would your advice be?
Yeah, thank you, Angie, and thank you, Brahm. Wow, you know, it's quite, yeah, it's quite a life you have had there, and you have been, you're really growing up very rapidly, and I'm very happy for you, sir. I'm very happy for you. And I hope you keep going the same way. Yeah, and a lot of good years ahead for you. Angie, yes, I've had a lot of experience and very humbling experiences dealing with parents who have had, who came to us because they were having challenges with their children. You know, one of the patterns I noticed was most of the time it's the mother who calls in, you know, and then they will tend to say, hey, fix my kid, and then I will try and say, why don't you come in with your husband, and then we'll try and talk about, you know, what's going on at home. And invariably I end up helping them understand where they could make changes in the way they are parenting so as to build a better relationship with their children. One of the most I wanted to say disturbing, one of the most worrying things that I see is single moms raising sons. And that is one of the most challenging scenarios I have seen. Most of the single moms raising sons have a pretty tough time in trying to be both mother and father to the son. And invariably what happens is they are more the mother, because they are the single mother, and more the mother, it gets amplified, and they are then they play the father's role. So it's very difficult. So I try and help them understand that where they can, they should try and find a male authoritative figure elsewhere to help partner with them so that the boy gets a bit more of the fatherly influence to shape their lives and to grow up and to grow. And because I think both moms and dads, generally speaking, they bring different values to the children. You know, the moms bring the love, care, and the concern. The dad is more the protector, the survivor, and ownership and accountability, responsibility is what the dad brings into it. So both of these values are very useful for a child to get it from both ends. But if you only have a single parent, that's kind of difficult. So that is challenging, but it's not impossible. Find an authoritative male figure in the sports arena, or a grandfather or an uncle, or even a godfather for that matter. It could help. The other one is more of the both parents not aligning themselves in how they should treat the child. That means each parent using a different parenting style with the child, and that confuses the child. You can have a situation where the mom is more permissive and the dad is more authoritarian, for example, and that's really quite extreme. Or sometimes you can get the mom who is the authoritarian, the disciplinarian in the house, and the dad is the more easy-go-lucky kind of guy, and that puts the parents in conflict because the children will tend to play one parent against another. It's only natural because they have their needs that they want to satisfy, so they may tend to do that. And it's very important for parents to notice that where they are different in their parenting style and try and align them, especially on critical issues. It's very important. I've mentioned this before. And then when it comes to, besides aligning, for those families where the parents get divorced, so important for them, as Andrew, you put it, to come back, to do it amicably, and also to come back and co-parent the children. So when you do split, you need to to have the children as the highest priority in your daily lives. And I think it's very important to make peace with the spouse who you have separated from, and find ways to come together to deal with the child, so that the child does not feel that he's only got one parent to deal with. He still has the presence of both, and it's all what the child wants. Sometimes, of course, the child will love to see the parents together, living, hugging, but if it has to come to that and they split, they still like to see the parents together in front of them, parenting them, looking after them, protecting them, and taking care of their interests. Those are some.
Thank you, Frank. So I like to also add that when I counsel children who are from dysfunctional families and the parents have split up, very often the issues that they have is to do with the parents not getting along. And the worst thing that happens to them is hearing one parent speak badly of the other parent. The reality is many of them can see from themselves what are their weaknesses and what are the strengths of each parent. But for one parent to highlight the weaknesses or the issues related to the other parent really hurts them. And it causes them to become very reclusive and even just wanting to disengage themselves from both parents. So I often end up having to speak to the parents and says, please don't say anything negative about the other one, because you have already split up. Please don't continue the problems that you had, because that's really in the past. Build a new relationship that is about focusing on raising your child together, because you both owe it to your child. You have both brought this child into the world, or even if you've adopted the child, you have both taken the responsibility of this child. So focus on what is the best way to still raise this child in a responsible and caring way, even you're no longer together. And one of the things that you can just do is stop saying anything negative about the other parent. And for mothers who are raising sons, please be aware that your sons need a male role model. And better still, that their male role model is still their biological father, if he's still around, and to help him see the goodness in their fathers. Because after all, no person is completely bad. Just because you have both split up, you may end up focusing on their negatives. But the reality is each person has positives and negatives. And this is about training our mind to focus. So help the kids focus on the positives, because that is going to be what your son is going to benefit from. So if we care about our children, stop the fighting. So there's a question for you here, Brahman. What do you think your parents can do to help you not hide things from them if you're able to turn the clock back in time?
I was actually typing my answer to that already. Basically what I wrote was, I think it helps to create a non-hostile environment whenever your kids try to confide in you, or like whenever your kids get into trouble. And I think it's really important to not immediately turn to anger or into physical punishment, because in all honesty, I don't really agree with the hitting your children thing, because for me it didn't really feel like an act of love. Because at least for most parents that I know, usually they'll say, physically corporal punishment is like an act of love, to stop them from doing bad things in the future. But I feel like the same thing can be easily achieved with just trying to understand their perspective and trying to empathize with them and talk to them as an adult. Yeah.
Thank you, Brahman. Mei Cheng, can I now bring you online, turning your video on, please? As you had been working in the schools, having been a vice principal in the MOE system, what is the view on corporal punishment? Do you see that as something that works on the kids? And I think this is more the boys who get caned. Or do you see this as an archaic approach to discipline and upbringing that is no longer has a place in this modern times? Oh, you need to unmute yourself first, May.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I don't agree with corporate punishment. Yeah, like what Brahm said, it is not an act of love. It's not kind to do that. Yeah. My personal experience, I think in schools generally we will not do that. Yeah, mostly all schools will not do that. Yeah, and from my personal experience is that during my younger days, when I'm not so mindful as a parent, I had once threatened to cane my son. I mean, just threatened. And then he will say that, you're a bad mom because mothers are supposed to love their children and not to hurt them. So that, I remember so clearly. That's why even dealing with students and all that, I think we need a kindness. We need to understand them much more than just meting out punishment and claiming that it's for their good. Yeah, I think it's a hurt that they will be sort of bear in them, that scar for a long time. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for sharing that, May. And it's amazing that your son has such deep wisdom to share with you, to say that, that's not love, is it? Yeah, when you want to harm me. Yeah. Okay. So Brahman, there's a question as, are you the youngest in the family? And what made you want to take the mindfulness course at NUS? It's called the Undefeated Mind, by the way, but what made you want to sign up for this course?
I read online when I was still in the army about the benefits of mindfulness and how it can help with stress and anxiety. I actually started experiencing some symptoms of anxiety when I was in the army. When things got very hectic, I find it hard to breathe, and my heart rate would go up for no reason. And so I was actually trying to find a way to solve that. And some Google searches actually led me to mindfulness. Yeah. And then when I entered NUS, I actually saw that I was able to take the course taught by Prof. NG. And a lot of my seniors have given me very good reviews on the module. So I actually decided to take it up. Yeah.
And how do you apply it now to manage your anxiety, assuming that you still have some form of anxiety, or is that all gone now?
Oh, it's mostly gone actually. Yeah, it went away like a month or two after I finished the course. Yeah, I think the daily meditation and body scans really help with that. Yeah.
Thank you. And those of you who don't know what body scan is, you can always get the audio track available on our Brahm Center website to use it. But having said that, you still need to attend a course to understand how it works and why it works before you use it, or as you're using it, would make it much more effective and beneficial. So there's a question here is, do you advise your 30-plus-year-old son to get settled down instead of going on dating? If I have a son who is 30 plus and still dating, I said, yes, you are a wise man, because you didn't just jump into a marriage and end up committed to someone that you were unsure of, but you think that it's time to do it. I recall this girl who was dating a guy, and she was in her early 30s. And I asked her, I said, how do you rate your boyfriend? Because she was planning to marry him. I said 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. How do you rate him? And her answer was, he's a 6. I said, what? A 6? And you want to marry him? And she said, yeah, because what if I can't find another guy? I'm like, wow, this is really scary that you would want to commit yourself to a guy that you think is only a 6 on your scale. So fortunately, he has broken up with her, and I am so grateful to him for having done that, because he's done both of them a favor. Because if you can't even think of the person that you're going to be married is a 9 out of a 10, really, perhaps marriage is being committed to for the wrong reason. there are lots of people happier single than some who are married. So if your son is happy, let him be. Please don't push him into a commitment that may end up feeling like a jail sentence. So I'm sure there are many people who are happy out there, but there are also many people who feel that they have got into a jail sentence. And this is why Frank is seeing so many people to help themselves to be more, feeling more grateful about who they ended up with. Frank, would you like to add something to that?
Oh yeah, it's it's very interesting if you look at the institution of marriage. It's useful research, over the time. It all started off thousands of years ago as purely an estate enhancement exercise. I want to marry into this family because I have a castle, or I have a larger piece of land, And thousands and thousands of years later, today, when you ask people, why are you getting married? I'm marrying for love. Now, if you take today's scenario and you kind of time warp it back to 10,000 years ago, they will probably turn around and say, you are crazy or what? Why you want to marry for love? What's love? Kind of stuff. But it has evolved and it has changed. And there are many reasons why people enter into marriages. And when I sometimes sit down with young kids who also have young children or young adults who have relationship challenges, the first question I will ask them is, are you very happy with yourself? Because if you haven't established who you are, what you want, what is at stake for you, what you care about, whether you are in the job that you like, are you settled? Are you fully independent unto yourself? Because if you're not, and you're looking at the other guy or the other girl to feel some void in you, then that relationship is going to be starting off on the wrong footing. It's very important to feel very assured and know you and know what you are capable of doing and not doing, and be ready to project that to the world, rather than in normal relationship, we hide all our ugliness and then they all come out after 2 years of marriage, right? And then the honeymoon is over. Wow, here comes the real person. And my God, here we go again, So it is very important to be fully independent and capable. And even for the kids who are out there who are staying with their parents up to 30, 35, I know our HDB policies are not very friendly for the single young ones. I think we are also turning them into adult teenagers. That means their sense of ability, the sense of ownership over their life, the sense of responsibility and accountability to themselves for their own life, to live it the way they want to live it, rather than be tied to their parents' aprons. It's not helping. It's not helping them in developing themselves. So if you take it back to the pre-teen and teen years, if you can help your kids take on this ownership, responsibility, and accountability thing, let them get out there, make decisions, let them make the mistakes, and let them carry this into their adulthood and their early adulthood. I think you are preparing them well for their future adulthood, right? And before they get into a marriage, they must be prepared. They must know themselves first, then muscle into marriage.
Thank you, Frank. So I tell both my kids who are now in their early 20s, if you're really in love with someone, just go and live together, because it's the best way to find out whether you can live together. Loving each other doesn't mean you can live together. So give it a try first. And, I think it's time that we can be open-minded about this and not worry about what your neighbor's going to say, what your siblings, your relatives are going to say. It is none of their business. It is the business between the two young people who are checking out to see whether they can make a life together. And as parents, it's also not for them to be married so that we have grandkids. Let's care for their happiness. Let's care for their well-being. And it is a very different world today. So let them be. Let them discover the world themselves and find their own way, especially when they are in their 30s. Okay, Brahman, there's this question for you about carrot and stick parenting strategy. So does this mean, in your opinion, that a carrot and stick is not the way to do parenting?
I think um, it's a good way to do parenting, but the stick should never be physical. I saw there's a like there's an elaboration about a tough message by dad and then the soft approach by mom. I feel like that might not be the best way to use the carrot and stick because it kind of creates like a good parent and a bad parent. And the person who's playing the bad parent, I don't think he or she will enjoy whatever her children might think about them, because there's one parent that's always like nice, but then the other one's always punishing them, and then it creates like a message like, oh, one parent cares more about me than the other. So I feel like a carrot and stick approach can work. Actually, it should work, but both parents should be doing both things at the same time and be united in the front that they give to their children. Yeah.
Thank you. Perhaps because of what you went through, Brahman, that you have such deep wisdom. Yeah, your answers are really good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And there's another question here. Would you be skeptical or afraid of getting into a relationship because of what has happened in your own life?
I think for me personally, I don't think I'm very skeptical about relationships, because I have very good examples from outside my family. So like my friends' parents, they all seem like they are capable of maintaining and having good, healthy, and long-term relationships. So actually, whatever my family has is like, it made me realize like it might be an outlier and not something that will happen to everyone. Yeah. So I'm not that skeptical.
Thank you. So there's a question here. I feel this huge amount of negative emotions, mostly anger, which arises in me when I teach my kids their homework and when my husband speaks rudely to me. I wish to understand more why these situations trigger my emotions. Well, first of all, May, you may wish to chime in, but I always don't think that it's a good idea for parents to be teaching their kids or helping them do homework because there is just too much of identification, especially like, when I remember when my daughter wasn't good in math and I'm really good in math, I find it really hard to teach her math. And it's like, just pay somebody else to do it unless we can't afford it. Because being a parent and trying to be an academic teacher are two different roles. So I'm going to get you to chime in on that. But on the other part of the question is, when my husband speaks rudely to me, you get triggered. Well, anyone speaking rudely to anyone, there is a trigger. So there's nothing abnormal about that. But the fact that you are aware of it and you're asking this question, it's a really good awareness to have. And yes, mindfulness can help you. So you may wish to sign up for the Mindfulness Foundation course that could be starting, I think, quite soon, or if it hasn't, will be the next month. So May, could you please chime in on parents tutoring their kids?
As a teacher, former teacher, I couldn't teach my own kids, honestly. I think that, you're right. Parent, are you a parent or are you a teacher? That is completely a role. I think as adults, we understand how to do, say, a math problem, and we expect that when we explain, our children will be able to get it. Sometimes there are so many factors as to why they are not ready to be able to understand. And I think it's good to always, ask them, to equip them with the skills to ask questions and to approach the teacher. That's what the teachers are there for, to help our children to understand and to be able to do their work. So I would advise that parents, perhaps your role will be more providing resources if your child needed some resource materials, or supervise their homework in terms of how many pieces of work they need to complete and by when they could complete them, and just to check with, to check that they do that. Yeah, more so than to teach them. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm just going to take the last two questions and I'm going to get everyone to say their concluding words to wrap up today's session. So there's a question here is, would you say that if a teenager was to be introduced to the mindfulness course in her younger years, he or she would not wish to sign up, or the maturity plays a big part in the young person? I think it has to do with a teenager or a young adult wanting to do this course. And they're not forced into it. So I'm pretty sure Bremen and many of the students that have taken the course at NUS with me were not forced into it. And I've seen students being forced into it when they are sent to Brahm Center for the course, and the outcomes are very different. And Bremen, you might want to chime in later on this point. And the other question here is, how do you advise young teens to not start thinking about dating? Well, if they're not thinking of dating, then maybe they're not very normal. They may be dating, but they're not telling you. It's like I was counseling this girl, and she looks so conservative. Her parents think that she's a really, a conservative goody two-shoe. Well, it's totally opposite, because she just projected an image that her parents wanted to see. But the opposite is true in terms of her experience in dating and the extent of experimenting that was going on. So if you force your kid to pretend not to be interested in the opposite sex, then you're just forcing something that is abnormal. I'm very grateful. When I started menstruating at the age of 12, my father bought me a book. And now this I'm talking about 40 years ago, and was called Every Woman. It's like, he couldn't talk to me about it, but he bought me a book so that I understood what is STD, what is pregnancy, and what are the consequences if I make some not so wise decisions. And because of that book, I took responsibility and I learned how to look after my body. So please teach your children how to look after their body, and how, if they make decisions that later on people could use against them, it's not very helpful. So teach them more from that perspective, rather than no boyfriend, cannot chit chat with guys, cannot go dating, and so on and so forth. You're just going to find it impossible now with social media, and also it's co-ed school. I mean, it's like the guy sitting next to her could be the one she's dating. So how would you know? Okay, so let's go around the room. May, would you like to start? Some concluding words on today's session?
Yeah, I think as our children grow up to become teenagers, we also need to change our, the way we parent them. As they grow older, then we will use our ears and our eyes more. We observe, their behavior, and if they're not feeling well, we could ask, what's wrong? Would you care to share? And when they share, we listen. We use our ears to listen to understand, rather than listen to say, okay, what shall I say now? So when it comes to saying, I think we say less, right? If they need us advice, we will do that, but be very mindful of what we say. So we use our ears and use our eyes more. Yeah.
Thank you. Frank.
Of all the clients that I see, whether it is a parenting issue, a marital issue, or individual issues dealing with stress, anxiety, and depression, very rarely is there any correlation to the degree, to the master's degree, the PhDs that they hold. It's all about how they are dealing with the stressors in their life. Their expectations, for example, their yearnings, the tendency to compare. These are the day-to-day real life challenges that people have. So when we raise our children, and when we are putting in as much effort academically at home as the child is getting in the school, we are missing out as a parent on one very important part of nurturing your kid, how to prepare them for the world, and How do they deal with relationships? How do they deal with disappointments? How they deal with bullying and harassment? How can they remain street smart, for example? You know, a lot of bad things are out there. How do you bring them up to speed on this kind of things? Because these are the kind of values that makes them far more resilient when they become adults. So I think one of the best approaches on this kind of things is when you're talking to your kid, especially when they get into the pre-teens and teen periods, is always talk about choices and consequences. So if you want to do something, let me hear what you think are the consequences, and I'll bring my wisdom and I'll tell you what the consequences are. And if you still want to press on when you know that the consequences are not going to be as much in your favor as you like it to be, then go ahead, but you must be prepared to pay the price. Now, when you do that with your kids, now you are raising thinking kids, not the kids who are raised on right and wrong, but thinking kids. Kids who can think through the issues for themselves and become more resilient and capable as they take on life.
Thank you, Frank. That's really wonderful. Bremen, you do have a question here, by the way. So if you'd like to answer that, that would be great too.
Which one is
You
it?
talk to your parents about how you feel.
Oh, yes, I have. I talked to them about what I learned from the course and how it really helped me. I've actually asked my mom to sign up for the course, but she's not very receptive because I think there's like a stigma, like that needing therapy or like going for all these mindfulness courses, they make you like broken, which is clearly not the case because I think almost everyone needs some help and guidance in navigating through their feelings because everyone's feelings are very complex. Yeah, so yeah, hopefully she changes her mind in the future.
And do you have any concluding words that you'd like to share with parents out there to help create a more conducive space for their kids to be able to open up and to be more trusting of their parents?
I think the most important thing is being able to understand and listen to your kids, as Miss May Chung said just now. I also feel like it's very important to recognize that the world that you were like parents, like you as parents were raised in, is very different from the world that people from my generation are raised in. So I think it takes extra understanding to be able to empathize with what we're struggling with, because it might not even be like it might not have been a very big issue during your time. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, I know many parents would like to send their kids for a mindfulness course. If your kids are listening in and they are saying that, yes, please send me to a mindfulness course, that's great. But I think what's even more important is for us parents to take up a mindfulness course, for us to have the awareness in order to shift the way that we respond to our kids, the way we support them, motivate them, and to keep their well-being at the center of everything that we do, if our role that we're going to take seriously is about supporting their growth. So instead of wanting things for them, is to understand what is it that they want. Now, I gave a talk on how emotions get in the way of happiness yesterday. If you missed that talk, please go to Facebook page and get the link to the YouTube. That is a recorded version there. And I asked parents, when was the last time you asked each other, are you happy? Have you asked your kids, are you happy? So today I asked my son, are you happy? He looked at me funny, like, why are you asking me that, Mom? And I said, no, are you happy? He said, yeah. I said, that's good, right? Because we take it for granted that they are happy. And it's not always the case. And if they're not, it's an opening line that you can start to engage them and says, what is it that I can do to make your life better? And listen. That's what May said, listen. Not to get defensive, but listen, so that we really hear from them what their needs are towards us. Okay, so I hope this session has been useful to you, and join us again next week. In the meantime, there are lots of other programs. Please go to our Facebook page and register. Thank you so much, Bremen, for your amazing sharing today. And thank you, Frank and May, for co-hosting this with me. Bye, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Happy parenting.